So, Lead Without Limits. I recently wrote and published this book because I wanted to share my experience from 23 years of coaching and actually 28 years service in the military and 13 years of actually coaching leaders out in the commercial world and the business world. Leadership is a really interesting and topical conversation, but one of the things that I would relate to on this one is business owners, founders, leaders, CEOs, they don't fail on the basis of market conditions, on influences that are going out there. They fail on the habits that they have as a leader. And the point of Lead Without Limits is it focuses on the habits that you started are not going to be the habits that scale a business. It's kind of like the premise of what got you here won't get you there. And often business owners, for all the right reasons, they will grow and scale a business, and suddenly they will reach a point where that business starts to create challenge for them, and where they start to focus all of their efforts on the way in which they started the business. And that's not going to be the way you scale the business, and certainly not in leadership. So leadership and Lead Without Limits is really all about the habits that are holding you back and what you can do to get rid of them and actually move to the next phase of growth. So one of the things that you'll find in the book that I talk about is what I call the CEO paradox. And it's really just quite simply the fact that what you understand as a leader in terms of how you deliver shifts monumentally as you grow an organization. And the point here is that the leadership that you founded the company on, the business on, it needs to change. It needs to change in terms of how you deliver it going forward, because if you don't change it, those habits will slow you down because you will become the bottleneck. I also focus on the mindset, and I use the analogy of getting above the parapet. It comes from my military days, and it really focuses on accountability, ownership, and responsibility in a business. At the very highest level, you as the business owner, as the CEO, you own everything that goes on in that business. You put your head above the parapet to start the business. The reality of what goes on is you'll get to a point where you might not be able to see the wood for the trees through your own leadership, and suddenly what starts to creep in is what goes on below the parapet: blame, excuse, and denial. So when we start to focus on mindset, we start to shift the way that we reframe what we're doing, how we're doing it, and we take ownership from it. We start with responsibility, we build accountability, and ultimately we own everything that goes on. So the 10 habits that I talk about in the book, they really focus on a series of 10 habits, and I break them down in the book to key areas. And so the first 3 habits that we talk about in the book are all focused on clarity and control. Now, the premise of the book is what is getting in the way and what you've got to stop. So for instance, when I talk about clarity control in the book, I talk about stop micromanaging. Lots of business owners that I come across, lots of CEOs, they'll sit at the head of the table and they'll micromanage everything that's going on. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that micromanaging is necessarily the wrong thing to do, but it's often misunderstood. But when we start to focus on shifting those habits, actually what we can start to do is to create greater clarity and far, far better control. So when we go to section 2 in the book, we're talking about avoidance and accountability. And I want to just pick up on habit 5. Again, there are 3 habits within this one, but habit 5 is one that I come across so often. Holding on to the wrong people. I see this in business all the time. And it's a misplaced loyalty more often than not. Now, here's the real truth behind as you grow and scale a business. You will have started the business with maybe a group of people. And as the business starts to scale, so do the abilities that you require from your team to take that business to the next level. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean simply that if you've got somebody that has a set of skills that when you started as a founder were absolutely point for where you are at that point, as you grow the business, they start to get out of their comfort zone and unable to actually perform at the level that you're looking and need them to perform. And so what happens is you hold on to them, but actually in the heart of hearts, you're kind of like, no, they're kind of like, they're not delivering anymore. And we end up holding on to those people. That's a tough gig. That's a tough question. It's a tough opportunity that you've got to take and say, look, actually, this is done. I'm going to do everything I can to help you in the next venture, in your next journey, in the next career. But you've outgrown what we can do within the business. The other obvious one is where you've got people in the business who are, let's just put it, the very far extreme toxic, in which case they've got to go. But again, I see business owners, I see leaders that hold on to those people. So when we start to look at avoidance and accountability, we're really focusing and drilling down on those habits that get in the way again as you within your business and organization. The third area of habits, and there are 4 habits here, is where we, as the leader, the habits are actually the bottleneck in the business. And it's really interesting. I just want to pick up again on just one habit in the book here. And it's simply this. It's prioritizing short-term wins. There is so much noise and distraction out there that sometimes a short-term win can come up and will take your eye off where you're heading and what you're striving to achieve. That habit is so dangerous for a business, because if you've got a long-term venture, a long-term goal, and it takes energy, it takes commitment and resilience to stay on course with that one, the moment that you start to shift the dial on that, the moment that you start to move to actually there's a short-term win, or as we used to call it in the military, something shiny, frankly, shit happens. And what will happen is you'll start to go down the wrong way, you'll become distracted, and before you know it, you lose fact and lose account of where it is you're heading, what you're striving to achieve. So when we start to look at these, the three areas of the habits that get in the way, control over clarity, having a look at avoidance and accountability, and then bottleneck to scale, you can start to see as a business owner, as a CEO, as a managing director, the habits that will get in the way. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is the premise that, this is a leadership book. So on the fact that it's a leadership book, it's based on the premise that you've got a team. And so you've got to start to focus and engage on others within the team. And there's a few areas that I want to pick up here. One of them is, as you start to scale any business, is looking for your emergent leaders. So what do you do in your business right now to actually engage in the people in your organization, in your business, who are going to be the next managers, who are going to be the next leaders? How do you start to engage them? How do you start to invest in them? How do you start to develop them? And again, once you've worked through the 10 habits, you'll start to see there's opportunity to really drill down on leading without limits. The other one that I want to pick up on here, if I may, is actually transformational leadership. And the shift, that it's not just, where we start to look at organizational culture, but when you start to really focus and drill down on improving those habits and shifting your own frame of reference on how you turn up, you can start to be truly transformational in actually the leading and leadership of your organization and business. Look, I wrote this book because in what I do, I've got a lot to share. And, throughout my military service, we did this stuff on a daily basis, and in some pretty challenging and dusty and warm areas, as you can probably imagine. What I've learned in business is leaders need help. And this is just a guide, but it's that first step of actually starting to understand what's getting in the way and slowing you down. If you're too busy, if you're the bottleneck in the business, if everything defaults to you, if you're getting in the way of scaling your business, then go get the book, have a read of it. You'll be glad you did. My name's Steve Gaskell. This is Lead Without Limits, Decoding Excellence.